All right, so we're going to talk about the digestive system here today. And so the purpose of our digestive system, its function in our body, is to take the foods that we eat and break them down, convert them into simpler, smaller molecules that we can absorb into our blood and that our cells can actually use. So like I said, little chunks of cheeseburger don't float through your blood to get to your cells. All the foods that we eat get broken down into very simple compounds. And so there's sort of two types of digestion that help this happen. The first is called mechanical digestion. And mechanical digestion, if you're going to eat a huge veggie burger like this guy is, then you first start by chewing it, right? And chewing our food is part of digestion. Because as you chew your food, you're basically tearing it and grinding it into smaller and smaller pieces. And that's important. Because the way the chemicals that help us digest food works, the greater the surface area that they can work on, the better that food and the more quickly it can be digested. So chewing up your food really to find mush before you swallow it actually helps in your digestion. But that's just physically breaking something up. But also in our mouth, chemical digestion begins. And chemical digestion is when enzymes and acids actually produce a chemical change that take large molecules and break them into smaller molecules. And this starts with saliva. Saliva in your mouth is not just water. It has a mixture of other substances in it. And one of those is an enzyme. And the enzyme is called salivary amylase. And salivary amylase is an enzyme that digests starch. Sophia?
Wait, so the only reason we have saliva in our mouth is for digestion?
No, it also, it helps sort of make our mouth and our esophagus more slippery so we could swallow foods. Like, did you ever have dry mouth, you swallow a chunk of food and it hurts when it's going down your esophagus?
So is that why you can't do the saltine thing?
Yeah, part of the reason you can't do the saltine challenge, which the saltine challenge is to eat 6 saltine crackers in a minute without taking a drink, is because, so those crackers are mainly starch. And that's what saliva breaks down, starch. And so they absorb a lot of this saliva, and pretty soon your mouth is really dry and you can't chew them, and it's big, thick paste in your mouth. It's gross. But those enzymes help to break starch. In fact, if you take just one saltine cracker, put it in your mouth and chew it up, and leave it in your mouth for a couple minutes, just let it get all soft and mushy and super saliva soaked, that's good alliteration, then it will start to taste a little bit sweet because the starches in the cracker actually get broken down into sugars. That's a simpler form of starch, is sugar, a simpler type of carbohydrate. And so you can try that sometime. So you have salivary glands that are around your mouth, and then you have special little areas under your tongue and in your cheeks that squirt the saliva into your mouth periodically. Have you ever been reading a book and you yawn and get a little spray of saliva on your book? Does that ever happen to you?
No.
Probably happen to all you just don't want to admit it. But that's because what happened is you happen to yawn right as your salivary gland was spraying some saliva in your mouth. It comes in a little spray out of your mouth. It's also why if you're hungry and you smell your mom's cooking some delicious beans and rice for dinner, then you smell it and your mouth starts to water. It's your brain telling your salivary glands to start working. If you are going to get sick and vomit, one of the first ways that you know is what happens in your mouth.
Well, you throw up.
Before you throw up, your mouth starts getting a watery feeling in your mouth. That's really your body getting ready, saying, uh-oh, something's coming out. I better get some saliva in my mouth so this comes out real easy. So all that has to do with saliva.
Wait, so if you, okay, so the saliva thingy, is there can someone saliva problem that it just like squirts all over?
I've never heard of that, but I guess it could happen.
Really?
All right,
That's weird.
so you chew up your food. You mechanically digest it and break it into smaller pieces. Your saliva starts breaking down starches into sugars, and then you swallow it. And when you swallow your food, it goes down a tube called your esophagus. So your esophagus is basically a hollow tube that connects your mouth to your stomach.
Is that like, is the stomach and the esophagus really not that big?
No, the esophagus is about this long, 25 centimeters
But
long
like
or so.
with
Narrow eyes, yeah, it's like, about this. Here's a model.
That's really how big it is?
So really, the mouth, the esophagus, it's probably, this is not to scale. It's a little longer than that, and a little wider, but pretty close to that. It's not far off. The esophagus. Now, the esophagus, it's a muscular tube. When you swallow a piece of food, it doesn't like just drop into your stomach because of gravity, right? What happens is your esophagus squeezes that food down. It's kind of like a tube of toothpaste. And it's the muscles in your esophagus contract, first the ones at the top, then the one below it, and it kind of squeezes that food down until it reaches
So
into your
that's
stomach.
saliva's for?
So it squeezes it down, yeah.
So it's voluntary.
Yeah, it's voluntary. But you start it voluntarily,
And
when
then
you,
it's involuntary.
and then it can go, that's called peristalsis, and it continues all the way down until that food's in your stomach.
Is this
So it's pushed down by these muscles, and that process is called peristalsis. And that squeezes this food into your stomach.
is the stomach like wouldn't you imagine the stomach to be bigger to have the food processed before it's digested?
No, because the stomach, so we'll talk about this. So the stomach then, so the esophagus ends in the stomach. There's a little opening there, a little muscle that can open and close, so that stuff from your stomach doesn't come up into your esophagus. And then your stomach is this pouch, muscular pouch here, okay? And this muscular pouch, its job is to basically churn this food, mix it around, while strong acids are secreted into your stomach. And these acids are what helps to break down further the foods that you eat. They help with digestion. So it has hydrochloric acid in it. It's very acidic, and it helps break down those foods. And that food starts to turn from, chunks of stuff that you chewed up into this liquefied sort of mush called chyme, chyme. And then at the other end of the stomach is another opening that leads into the small intestine. So this acid that helps to digest food, it's good in our stomach, helps us digest food, but sometimes this little muscle at the top of the stomach doesn't close all the way, and sometimes stomach acid can creep up into a person's esophagus, and it hurts. You know what we call that?
Heartburn?
Yeah, that's heartburn. So heartburn is when stomach acid, for some reason, goes up into a person's esophagus, and it hurts, and it irritates, and can eventually damage the esophagus because those strong acids are not supposed to be there. Our stomach has a lining that protects the stomach muscle itself from this acid because it could damage it. But it has this mucus, this layer that protects it. Our esophagus doesn't have that. So that's what heartburn is. And if you have heartburn, you can take different things. You can take those Tums and chew them up and swallow them. That neutralizes the acid. Other times you might take something every day, like I take a pill every day, that helps reduce the amount of acid in my stomach because I always would get heartburn. It reduces your stomach acid to help improve that problem. Because if you get heartburn a lot, frequently, for a long time, it can damage your esophagus. It can lead to esophageal problems including an increased risk of esophagus cancer. Right?
So, like, if you have really spicy food, you get heartburn.
Sometimes it depends on different people get heartburn for different reasons. For me, whenever I would eat something that had butter in it, that would give me heartburn. So it just depends on your own sort of way your body works. So yeah.
Hey, I have a question about the stomach then. Like, what if you're like really fat? Is your stomach bigger?
No, I mean your stomach expands and shrinks depending on how much food you eat and so forth. But no, if a person, if you might say that they're overweight, that's not their stomach. So if you're somebody, you have a huge, belly, you might call it, that's not really their stomach. What it is, it's layers of fat between their, inside of between their skin and their muscle, or between their muscle and the rest of their organs. And just because if you have repeatedly more calories than you're burning, your body stores that as fat, and that's what leads to somebody being larger like that. But it's not really their stomach itself.
So, you know how sometimes it feels like you have like food stuck in your throat? What is that?
It might just be something didn't quite move down. Maybe food, you didn't chew it up all the way, and there's a larger chunk and it's kind of not going down. Or like you're eating some Doritos, you didn't chew them up, and you have like a thick corner of the Dorito, and it like hurts the whole time you swallow it until it gets into your stomach. It just depends sort of on how your esophagus is working and what the foods are. Faith?
If it's in your esophagus, why do they call it heartburn?
I don't know. It doesn't have anything at all to do with your heart because it's in your chest, I guess, and it burns. So they just call it that. I don't know why they call it heartburn, but that's it. Acid reflux is the proper term for that. Acid moving up into your esophagus. The other thing related to stomach acid is, if a person has something like bulimia and they make themselves throw up all the time, that stomach acid, when you throw up, it's very acidic, the stuff that you vomit, because it's coming from your stomach. And so over time, that can eat away at a person's teeth, because your teeth sort of react with that acid, and then they can wear away at their teeth. It can damage their esophagus as well. Sophia?
This question's a little classy, but like, if you like throw up and it's like clear sort of thing, is that like spit?
Well, let's take this one thing at a time. If you vomit, if you're getting sick, what's happening is really vomiting is a protective adaptation that we have. How does it protect us? Like, why is our body getting rid of whatever's in our stomach in certain instances, right?
It could be harmful to your body.
Yeah, that
If
maybe
we're
we have
sick.
an infection. Or if you smell something really gross, that makes you gag and can make you throw up because it's our protective. It's why, so we're not going to go near something, a dead, rotting animal near the side of the road because it's going to make you sick. And that's to protect us because there could be diseases there. And so that's our sort of natural selection has led us to avoid those things, for those things to make us sick. So when you vomit, your stomach basically contracts, and then your esophagus, instead of squeezing the food down as it normally does when you swallow, the opposite happens, and those contractions happen from the bottom up, and that leads to whatever was in your stomach being sent out of your mouth. And so you probably know, if you just ate a ton of pizza and chicken wings, and then you get sick soon after, like the stuff you throw up is like recognizable, right? You say, oh yeah, there's some chunks of chicken in there, and oh, there's that piece of pepperoni, I guess I didn't chew that very well. But if it's been then 2 or 3 hours later, and you vomit, it doesn't quite look like pizza and wings anymore. Why not?
Because it's digested.
It's been partially digested. Now, eventually, if you're sick and you throw up a whole bunch of times, like when I had appendicitis when I was a kid, I threw up 38 times in one day. And so eventually,
38?
yeah. So everything that's in your stomach is gone, right? You've already, after 2 or 3 times vomiting, whatever was left in your stomach, it's all gone basically. And then though you still may be getting sick, you may call dry heaves, and you're just sort of like making that retching, vomiting noise, but there's nothing really to come up. But what can come up is some saliva that you swallowed, stomach acid sometimes comes up, bile that our body produces at the beginning, or a small intestine come up, and that's like that green, disgusting tasting, very bitter stuff. That stuff is what might come out after all the food is gone.
When I was little, I didn't know that you're supposed to chew the pasta. So so I just swallowed like the lunch straight, and then I threw up after. It wasn't fully digested.
No.
And
Yeah,
it
it's
was
gross.
gross.
All right, so food from our stomach stays in there a little while, gets churned around, gets digested by these acids, and then it heads into the small intestine. Well, calling it the small intestine, it's not small because it's short. It's actually 25 feet long. You could probably stretch my intestine. Hopefully you don't do this, but if I stood on that side of the room, you could probably stretch my intestine all the way to the other side of the room if you took it out of me and uncoiled it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's this long, long winding tube that goes all throughout your abdomen. So you can see it's down here below your stomach. If you look up here on this model, you know, what we might call your stomach, like this area, that's actually, your stomach is up higher. Your stomach is up here just underneath your rib cage. And then this part of your body is actually inside of your abdomen are your intestines, winding their way all around your abdomen. And so they wind all around there. And the food obviously travels through this tube over time. And along the way, it gets digested. And also, we start to absorb the nutrients from that food. We absorb, because by the time the food is moving through the small intestine, it's been digested. It's no longer chunks of veggie burger and pasta and rice and beans. It's now sugars and amino acids and proteins and fatty acids. It's been fully digested into these tiny little simple molecules that our body can use. And so we absorb those small molecules into our blood to be used.
Is that a typo?
What?
Absorb?
Absorbed. No, that's right.
No, wait,
Absorption.
Oh.
Yep. Olivia?
When you say your stomach hurts, are you like?
You could be talking about your intestine, could be talking about your stomach, depends on, exactly what's troubling you. So most of the digestion actually happens in the small intestine, because this food moves through this very long journey through the small intestine, okay? And along the way it gets digested and absorbed. But there's some other organs up here that we'll talk about that are related to digestion. Now, food doesn't actually go through our liver or our gallbladder or our pancreas, but they're all related to digestion. Okay? The liver itself, so this diagram up here, this large organ, this is the liver, okay? And it has a lot of jobs to do in our body. One of them is related to digestion. What the liver does, and you can see it here, is it produces a substance that's called bile. Bile is a special compound that helps to break down fats.
How are you using these fats?
Oh, I have it.
You do?
I guess I open this to it. So our liver makes bile. It's a greenish sort of substance that helps us to break down fats. And then the liver also removes poisons from our blood. It has excretory functions. It has a lot of things to do. And then this bile that our liver makes gets sent to our gallbladder to be stored. The gallbladder is kind of tucked underneath the liver here. This green thing, that's the gallbladder. So the liver makes the bile, sends it into this gallbladder, which stores it until we actually need it. And then when we eat something that has fat in it, our gallbladder squeezes some of this bile into the small intestine so that it can break down that fat. Okay? So the gallbladder basically just stores the bile and releases it into the small intestine. It goes through something called the bile duct. That's Sophia?
With the liver,
Go ahead.
sometimes like people have like problems with their liver or something. What is that like?
You get a lot of different problems with your liver. Sometimes people, like toxins, poisons can damage the liver. Alcohol can damage the liver. People can get cancer in their liver. And all those things could affect it in different ways. Sometimes the liver can have too much fat in it, You have fatty liver. So there's a bunch of different.
So if you're an alcoholic,
Yeah, then a person could get what's called cirrhosis of the liver, where basically they destroy their liver, and it can be fatal. You
doesn't
can
that happen if you're like smoking stuff?
not for the liver.
Oh, no, never mind.
Yeah, for the liver, but alcohol. People that are alcoholic and drink a lot all the time, for long periods of time, they can get cirrhosis of the liver. Their liver basically stops functioning. And then the last organ is the pancreas. Okay, the pancreas is tucked underneath the stomach a little bit. And it does a couple things. It creates enzymes called pancreatic juices that help to break down the foods. But also, as we just talked about in our endocrine section, it produces insulin, which helps regulate our blood sugar. Now, interesting thing about our small intestine is that it's not smooth inside. It's not kind of like if you imagine a rubber hose 25 feet long, that's not what the inside of our small intestine looks like. It's not smooth on the inside. It actually has all of these bumps and ridges in it. These bumps are called villi, these tiny little things, and they're very important because they increase the surface area of our small intestine. And they help us absorb the maximum amount of nutrients from our foods because they increase the surface area so much. So by the time the foods that we eat have gone through our stomach and were digested, they travel through all 25 feet of the small intestine and were further digested. Our bodies absorbed all of the useful materials from that food. What's left by the end, when they get to the large intestine, is not much that our bodies can use. All that's left really is water and some material that we weren't able to digest. Okay? And that food then moves into the large intestine. Large intestine has a few parts. What happens after the food travels throughout the small intestine, it then moves into this part. This is called the ascending colon. Then it comes across the transverse colon, down the other side of our body, the descending colon, and then out through the rectum.
Wait, so
this food travels up, across, and over.
that's like part of the colon thingy?
Yeah, if you talk about your colon, it's basically talking about this part of your large intestine.
Oh.
Yeah. And so the purpose, as this food's traveling through our large intestine, our body's basically reabsorbing the water from it because it's still liquidy at this point. And so our body doesn't want to get rid of all that liquid. Okay? It wants to hold on to it so our body can use it. So the water's reabsorbed in our large intestine. But the digestion is finished. No digestion happens in our large intestine. You know, on your quiz that you're going to take next week, one of the questions will be, what is the last organ where digestion happens? What's the correct answer? What are many of you going to say?
Large intestine.
But no digestion occurs in the large intestine. Maybe you won't because I just told you that. So as the food, it travels up, across, and down. By the time it reaches the end of the large intestine, we've reabsorbed all the water, and what's left is what we would call feces, poop. It's basically just undigested material. Plant matter, cellulose that our body can't break down, some bacteria from our intestine, some cells from inside our intestine are with it, and then that gets eliminated, and again it goes out through the colon, the rectum, which the opening of is the anus, and that's where that solid waste is eliminated from the body. Now there are times when our large intestine doesn't reabsorb enough water, and there's too much water that's still left. And what does that lead to?
Pee.
No.
Oh, I don't know. Scarcity.
too much water is left. What if too much water is left in this diarrhea? And so that leads to diarrhea. Other times the body absorbs too much water and it's too dry, the remaining waste, and that leads to constipation. Okay. If you've ever heard of somebody having to have a colonoscopy, maybe your parents had to go for a colonoscopy. It's a medical procedure people start having maybe once they're in their late 40s or 50s. It's to check their large intestine to see if there's any signs of colon cancer. And they basically put a camera in a person's through their rectum into their large intestine, and the doctor can look at the inside of their large intestine and see if anything looks suspicious in there. Okay. Other times people have to have an endoscopy, and that's sort of the same thing, but they go through the mouth and they look at your esophagus, they look at your stomach to see if there's any problems there. There's also a new type of thing where you swallow a little camera. You swallow this little camera, and it travels through your digestive system, and it captures images, and the doctor can look at those images to see all the parts. Because it's hard to get a camera into the small intestine. It's easy to get in the large intestine because you go up this way. Easy to get the stomach and small intestine because you go through the mouth. But there's no good way to get it through the small intestine. So they use this other tools, a new way they have of looking inside the small intestine.
But what if the stomach has to like grab it?
No, it's protected in special materials. All right. I guess let's label this diagram.
Yeah. Okay.
This is easy, right? So let's look at this. What is this tube?
Esophagus.
That's the esophagus. It leads to this pouch.
The stomach.
That's the stomach. So let's follow foods. Esophagus, stomach, and then it goes
Small intestine.
into the small intestine, which down here empties into
The large intestine.
large intestine, and then out of the body. All right. The other organs involved, but again, food doesn't go through the liver. The liver just helps produce bile. The gallbladder is tucked underneath the liver over here to store the bile.
Pancreas, I got it.
And then the pancreas to help produce some of those enzymes for digestion.
So the pancreas has to do the endocrine system and
And
the
digestive.
digestive.
Kind of like the liver is involved in the excretory. Oh, I don't have that slide. All right.
Don't we have one more slide?
You have the picture.
The
Our
body exhibit.
files got all messed up last
Oh
week.
yeah, that's what happened to Mrs. McCoy.
Yeah.
She couldn't find her she couldn't find the thing today for our notes,
Yeah.
and so we
Yeah. A virus.
Mr. Lewis, this is the first time I've never ripped my question of the day.
Wow.